Hello, and welcome to another episode of Exploring You, our podcast to guide you through the personal development jungle and all things mental health. Today's guest is Mr. Dan Sommer. He's very much into nature, mountain climbing, and life coaching. He's also been a pastor. Dan's background is ex-military. He's worked in places, some violent places all over the world. And he draws on his experiences to help his clients choose courage and happiness. If you're interested in how to break down the barriers that are surrounding your personal development, please have a listen, a watch, like, share, and comment. And I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to our podcast, all things mental well-being. I think I've got it right this time, Alexander. It's myself, Darren Siegenberg. I'm with the Mind Core CIC and Elysium NLP.
And I'm Alexandra Katzer, nature coach and forest bathing guide.
I'm Dan Sommer, Transformational Life-Coach.
Well, today's guest is Dan Sommer. Welcome, Dan. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing good as always. Yeah.
Oh, good man, good man. And we were discussing there. We've known each other now for the best part of 24 years. We first met in on a bodyguarding course. So, first of all, Dan, who are you?
Well, I'm Dan Sommer, Transformational Life-Coach, entrepreneur, and family man on a mission to have a positive impact on the world through motivating, inspiring, and empowering people worldwide. And this is kind of what I do. So, but it's been a long years from being in military to Securitas, 12 years there as training manager and operations manager, and Guard Force Commander, U.S. Embassy. Met you in '99 in a rainy week and built wealth down in Wales, on the Bregans, and then on from there.
It well.
Yeah, I went on to the SDU units from the U.S. embassies, surveillance detection units, when they were set up in '98. I was part of that and started teaching that. Didn't like the material, created my own, wrote my own manual, and sent that around and got sort of known for that. Took over the WFB, which was you and I was trained with after Robin Barrett left, and became the international director. Went to Mexico, where I was teaching SDU and close protection and counter assault teams at the police academies in several states. From there, it took off around the world: Hong Kong, Macau, Northern Ireland, Germany, Norway, Denmark, Middle East. Been around 24 countries now, and since then, been working on security projects and different high-risk scenarios.
It's such a varied career, isn't it? When you're working in security, you can go from one thing to another. It's such a vast industry, and the amount of people that you meet. And I was saying before, some of the stuff that you're dealing with is things like PTSD and trauma and things like that. So how it affects men and women, it affects everybody, doesn't it? That's the whole point about these podcasts, is being able to have a more understanding of what people actually go through and where they can go for help.
Exactly. Yeah, my first PTSD experience was, if you can put it in context, in '99 also, while we did training, I was also with Special Projects Group services in UK, and did like a close protection management training. And there was Neil Young of NYA, Neil Young Associates, for a K&I expert, right? Highly well-regarded company. And he taught a lecture on this, and informative briefing on kidnap and ransom. And then when I went to Mexico, of course, Mexico at that time in 2002, 2003, when I was down there, was like the place for K&R, right? And I met very quickly Max Morales, which was Mexico's most famous kidnap and ransom negotiator, a lawyer that was doing this as part of his job. And he, funny enough, he also has a security side business where he was like very into self-defense and disarming and shooting techniques, that kind of thing. Always had that kind of interest. So we got along well, met on the course. I started teaching him, he taught me. And lo and behold, 3 months later, I was working with some police people who had a family member who got kidnapped in Tlaxcala. And they just, because I having that seminar, KNR, as part of my course, they were like, hey, can you offer any information? And I ended up, kind of assisting and leading their KNR negotiation for this girl. And that's where I noticed that when she came home, PTSD was a huge thing, a huge traumatic event, and for the whole family, everyone. And that's where I first sort of really, really sat with the PTSD, where the victim has PTSD from the exposure and the experience they go through, but the whole parents and the family have PTSD from dealing with the stress of not knowing what's going on, and are we negotiating right? Are we doing the wrong things? Everything constantly kind of guessing yourself. And there comes like this kind of guilt. How long was I waiting for you to release me? Or how we were doing everything we could to get you released and paid or something. And everybody had bad consequences and coincidence. And they feel bad about it. Yeah, their conscience is bad, and they're stressed and traumatic. And it involves the whole family. And we see always in marriages there, after stress, there's a lot of PTSD. There's a huge amount of divorces, simply because the KNR business is all focused on the release. And once the release is there and they're back safe and you've been debriefed, then it's off you go. Kind of like you and I know from the armed forces and the security business, where it's like, all right, now we've done the debrief, and you go home and take a couple of weeks off, and then you can sit at home and look down a bottle of whiskey, or what are you going to do, right? And that's just the wrong way to deal with it. It takes a long time. It takes much longer time to bring people back than the negotiation process and the release process, right? And that's where I got introduced to it and started to noticing it and who's dealing with it. And then after that, it became quite common for me to help people whenever I saw they were in distress. So you can see the symptoms of this, the anxiety, the depression, or the anger issues and that kind of verse. You start seeing the PTSD thing. And of course, as you know, and I have this background, we have a lot of close protection officers or security risk, we have the same thing, and we bring it back home to our family and have problems there, and very often end up divorced as well. There's a huge rate higher. The divorce rate among bodyguards is like skyrocketing. I actually don't know anyone that hasn't been divorced at some time, right?
It's definitely a single man's business.
It is. And it takes a long time for you to actually come back and learn to be in a civilian environment where there are only friendlies, right? So no tangos around.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned about the PTSD in the family. I mean, studies have shown from one suicide, on average, 85 people are affected by one suicide. And, when you think about it, you've got your immediate family, like your wife, your children, or your husband and your children, whichever it may well be. Then you've got your family, you've got your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins. Then you've got your more distant family. Then you've got to look at the community. Then you've got your workmates. So it's hardly surprising that 85, on average, it could be even more, that 85 people are affected just by one suicide. And like you say, from that PTSD, the more, it's not just affecting that one person, it's the people around them as well. Yeah.
I'm very lucky. I have a very good friend in Iceland who's one of our leading psychiatrists in Iceland, and works a lot also in Sweden and teaches in the hospitals there in psychiatry. And I spoke to him about suicide, and we had this long conversation and who you to blame and what the victims were. And we spoke about a specific case, and where the media was like pointing someone to be the reason for this boy's suicide. And he said that all his research and all the research he known and worked with shown that in the interviews with young people or anyone who later committed suicide, that what the family thought was the real reason was never the reason, right? Mm-hmm. So what you concluded as a family, as you kind of finding reasons and explanations of why this happened, and in someone to blame, which is nicer than having to look at what you could cause, but also the thing of there must be something wrong. It couldn't just be that he did this for no reason. But the reason is often that we have absolutely no idea unless you are on a very confidential level with that person. And that is a problem in modern society. Most of us actually do not have these deep philosophical, life-changing debates and talks with each other anymore. We don't talk about deep issue, and we're becoming too PC and afraid of touching on sensitive issues. And so we're losing that connection. And that's one of the reasons I think it is getting worse. All sorts of mental disorders are getting worse because we have lost the community sense of sitting around the campfire and dealing with the issues, right? Mm. And so totally. you lock yourself up with your screen and look at that one, or you're on TV, or your headphones and the plugs in your ears when you go and mock again. And we have lost community sense. And that community is one of the most important things for solving mental disorders of any type. In my opinion.
Absolutely, totally. And this is my ethos altogether, is to get people to talk, particularly men, obviously, but I mean, women will talk, but there is that element with women as well, that they don't want to talk about their, the situation they're in. And we've got to be able to open up a bit more. And when we were speaking to another person on a podcast who works in HR, and I was saying, even in HR, human resources, that they're there to handle people, whether it be their stress at work, or they're being made redundant, they're losing their jobs. So they have an element of a duty of care in HR to be able to be approachable and have those conversations as well.
True. And it's very important. And it's of course, in HR, you're working greatly also with the new ideas of Simon Sinek, which is start with why, right? Trying to get the values back into companies. So it's like, how are you laid off? We've seen all these horrible, sort of what we call the American way, where basically security shows up with a box for you, and here you can pack your stuff and you get escorted out. That kind of ending on everything is so abrupt that it doesn't leave you time to process and get over things, right? Because we're afraid of what an employee might do if they're negative after work, after being sacked or told that, hey, here's your resignation period, etc. But it may be good for financial statements on your corporate sheet, but it's really bad for society and human beings in general. You have coworkers and friends often there you also need to say goodbye to, and they get torn away. So there are whole ways in society where we have to learn to change and be a bit more human. And we see the same in the military, where maybe you come home, you got injured or something happened to you, and then you're discharged because, you were in the hospital, now you're being recovered, and now you're on a discharge because, you can't do the job. But you actually need to go back to your unit and work out with them and then phase out. You can't just be sent home. Then you have this loss. It's like you've been torn away. It's like a child taken from family in reality, and it's really hard to deal with. And we forget that in human science. We forget the tribe. And we are tribal beings as human beings. We are tribal beings, and we create tribes, and we can move to different tribes. But there is a phasing in and there's a phasing out. And when you do that abruptly, you end up with problems. Always. Mm-hmm. And if you have a problem when you're happening, you are making it far worse, right? So a lot of the things we have to learn in society, how to deal with it, right? And also very often people are afraid of speaking to the person who's been through a traumatic, and they don't want to upset them. They don't want to say the wrong thing. And therefore they don't, or the standard thing, hey, call me mate. If you want to talk, just give me a ring, right? But the person who's depressed and anxious is not going to ring. You need to ring them, right? You can't wait for the depressed person to come out of the house and come for a visit. You need to go and pick him up and bring him to the pub. If you want, right? It's a wrong way of doing it. And that's because we lost this community. Right?
Yeah. You've got two sides. You've got those that won't talk, and you've got those that don't want to talk because they've got no idea what to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alexander, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just on the topic of trauma, I think that is such a stigma as well, or not much knowledge around trauma as well. Because I just did this 8 months training in trauma-sensitive coaching. And it was so interesting to see and mind-blowing to see how trauma is developing, because usually we just think of all the terrible things that happen, like you mentioned then, with the war or hijacking or kidnapping. But it could be also like bullying, being bullied over a certain period of time that can be traumatizing. So it's little things as well. And I think we need to raise awareness around that topic as well, to sensitize people on what trauma is and how it impacts your overall well-being and mental health as well.
Absolutely. And since we're all coaches, we see it too. We're trying not to be psychologists, but almost everyone you need to coach have some sort of limiting beliefs or depressions or anxieties or issues they're dealing with from their childhood or early life or whatever happened to them. So trauma really is deep, and it can come from anything. It can come from your parents' divorce or from something that happened at home, from a sibling or having a fight in school or anything. And it can stay with you a long time if you don't process it. And this is exactly the thing. It doesn't matter when a trauma happens. It doesn't have to be on the battlefield at all. It can be on the, as you say, on the school bus. It can be on the school ground. It could be in the family at the dinner table. It's just if you don't manage to process it, it will stay with you for a long time. And this is why we see that some people can go through horrific things and don't have PTSD, right? Because they have a better way of processing it. It's not that one person is weaker and the other stronger. It is just learned behavior. How is your environment there to deal with you? And what is your learned behavior of how to deal with it? And if you haven't been given those tools in your upbringing or your society or your organization, then you won't know how to deal with it, right? And that's why it's much easier for us, because we may be working with it. It's much easier for us to talk about it, and we've been through things. But for somebody who is just experienced, they never had that. And then as we see again today, as I'm talking about again, one of the problems with communities is everybody's on their phone. Nobody having the long dinners anymore, sitting together as a family, chatting or talking and getting over the day and problems, right? And so you're losing that also, because it's very important to release your traumas from day to day. And I met people that has traumas for simple things, like a colleague got fired or something happened on the road on the way to work, a train hit somebody or something, and they have trauma 20 years later, right? And it's never been dealt with because they were too stressed and they were too busy and there was too many things. And okay, it didn't happen to you. What's wrong with you? Right? And nowadays, of course, we have people having PTSD or trauma or anxiety for what's on the news, right? And you're far away from it, and you can't do anything about it because this new flash came up and it was very short and it was brief, and there was no processing time, and then it was left, and then you're supposed to go on with life, right? We saw that after 9/11. People were watching these people falling from the buildings, and people were leaving with going back after the coffee break from watching news, but they basically have a kind of PTSD that followed them for a long time around, and no way of processing because they didn't have. People didn't speak to them about that, right? You were sitting in Iceland or UK or whatever, and you watched people die in the tower, and you're thinking that could have been me. I go to work in the highways. It could have been blah blah. And you go home with that problem, but you have no way of solving it, and no one is talking to you about it. And if you don't have community, you can't say to anyone at night on the table like, "Hey, I feel real sad. It hurt me and it made me upset. I can't sleep at night because I was watching and I was thinking, how was this situation? How horrible was it, etc. So it really affected me." And that's where we have, and of course, as Darren said, as many men still run around with this feeling that speaking about sensitive issue is not very manly, and you just man up and have beer and slap each other on the back and say, let's get on, mate, right? But sometimes that works. For some men, that works, to sit with a fishing rod in each hand, look at each other for like 4 hours and say, "You good? I'm good. Did you find something? Yeah, I'm fine." And that's it. And you come back home and you're like, your wife says, "So what did you talk about? How's their home? How's their wife?" "I don't know." It's like, we were, it was a great time, we had like, we chatted on the way out, we chatted there, what's wrong with you? We're men, and sometimes it works, right? But when you have an issue, it doesn't work that way. You need to solve it, and we are very different, and we need to, of course, learn as friends and colleagues to look at our friends and colleagues how they are and not how we are, right? Not how would I like people to approach me? Yeah, but you're not that person. How does that person normally react? How do you think he would like to be approached with this problem? And that's how you have to do it, very often. And then ask them, simply ask them, and don't take no for an answer. right? Because
it's having that starting the conversation, isn't it, Dan? You know, when you see something wrong with, or you think you see something wrong with somebody, you know, is it a case of losing the art of communication to express ourselves? Are we also losing the art of communication to be able to ask that person as well?
Exactly, and that's it is a big problem. It's a very big problem. I've dealt a bit with, when I was pastor in Iceland for 7 years. I had a bit of dealing with prisons, where I was visiting prisoners and speaking to them, and they had all sorts of traumas as well, right? PTSD, and I have one that I'm still working with. Is one of his most traumatic event is when he was arrested as very young, right, 17, and he, as in an Alfred Hitchcock movie, still hears the sound of the jail cell door closing on his arrest night, right? And his detention, and just that trauma for this young man who was like, oh, never been, no crime, anything, you know. It was not that, and that effect is still in him, you know. There's still nightmares come, he's still frightened, right? And so it can be very, very vitally where it's coming from and what's causing it. It doesn't always have to be a violent thing. It could be that simple thing, and it just stays with you because right at that moment you were very sensitive, very open and unprepared, and something happened, and then it stays longer, right? And then you have no one to talk to. And what's often the problem also with prisoners, right? Because you put in the detention or prison, and maybe isolation even during investigation and interrogation, and you don't have any way to process your problems, right? So it stays with you and you come out. And then we have the horrible thing that we have learned now also is through genetics, that trauma, PTSD, can actually be carried on genetically. And we have seen that. And that is a whole different. You might not even actually realize why you are responding or having this problem, right? And when people are like, oh, it can't be you, but that's been proven again and again. And one of the best way to actually prove this thing is the simple thing, like if you're stepping on a hole in the field, you want to get your foot up really quickly. None of us like to stick a hand into a dark hole in the walls, right? Because inside our mind, and you guys are in UK now, right? And I'm in Denmark, or I lived in Iceland. We don't have snakes and scorpions and poisonous spiders living in there, but we still have that in our mind that you don't put in there. And you've probably seen, like myself, on social media, all these funny videos with cats that are sitting eating, and you put a cucumber behind them, and they turn around and they see a snake in that instinct thing. But this is a domestic cat that has never seen a snake in 20 generations or something, but it's still there because it's in the genetic code, the response to a certain event, right? And that is just not a very good response anymore in modern society, but we carry that with us. We carry our grandparents' problems from the war, and we've seen that a lot of problems in the first generations after every war. There's a lot of problems, right? Actually, the ones that goes through the war are better to deal with it than the second generation and the third generation, because they are carrying it. And now in research, as you know, we have actually seen this proven that it carries on. We can see the change, right? So we need to be much more aware of that too. That and whenever we take refugees, for instance, and I know that that's another sensitive issue today. Or it's like, oh, they should learn to behave, and they're guests in their country. And you're also like, yeah, but sometimes you have to think about where they're coming from. What kind of mental disorders do they already have because of the traumatic experience they've gone through, and having to leave everything behind and come to this alien culture and alien country, right? So it's easy to judge, but sometimes one needs to stop and think, but could there be another reason for this kind of behavior? And very often there is a very valid reason. I don't say it excuses everything. I'm not saying that at all, but there very often are very valid reasons for it. That may not be an excuse, but there's an explanation. And there's a difference always learning what's an explanation and what's an excuse. But as soon as I know, then I can learn how to deal with it and how to approach it and how to help with that thing, right? So.
It's interesting you say that, because with the NLP, when we're looking at people's phobias, you know, how to try, one of the first things we ask is where they learned that phobia from. And that could be, you know, if you, I know from past experience, somebody might be scared of birds. Well, where did you learn that from? Well, I know my mum was scared of birds when I was a kid, and she ran out of the room and left me in the room with the bird. You know, so they've learned that behavior of being scared of birds, purely from an experience they've had from their mother. So it's the first thing is where did you learn that behavior from? And that could be something from the past or somebody that you knew in the past. And you've created that behavior, and therefore that expands into your later life. And you seem to think that's the norm.
Yeah, exactly. Stories you were told as a child while growing up, while you were small, gets set in your mindset. You might not remember the things, but your grandparents told you stories or heard you speaking about it when you were 2, 3, 4, and then it stays with you, right? And it's in your subconscious. And then one day you sit and talk to us, and then you have a problem with getting your business to run or working with coworkers or something. And then after a long time, we come to the aha moment. It's like, oh, right. And there is that long suppressed memory that I hadn't thought of, hadn't brought up, right? And then you can finally move on. And it's fantastic when it happens, and it's a great thing. But it's also a little sad that it takes a long time, right, for many people. Right? And that's the thing. And as a priest, when I was a pastor, I often came home. I was so sad with the fact that I have people in here, and then the worst one has an 82-year-old woman coming in talking about the relationship she had with her mother, right? And your mother died like 40 years ago, and you're 82, and you still haven't moved past that, right? Because she just never had that thing, that time, that conversation, that going through why that moment, why is this behavior, right? Why are you doing this over and over again, and so the behavior is so interesting how it is stepped in this, and whether it is a mental disorder, because it's actually a behavior too. It is a behavior in response to an event with a behavior that is just not useful for us. It's not productive. It's destructive. And I have, for instance, a very simple thing with myself. I had this thing as a Viking thing. We have something with licorice. I don't know why. It's something in our Germanic thing. I was joking. It's because we were Vikings, and then we sailed on boats, and everything tasted of tar, salt, and smoke. And that's basically what licorice tastes like. So it's like a genetic thing. But my joke is I never understood, because I always get this. I get headaches and high blood pressure and irritation when I eat licorice. But once in a while, I would binge eat licorice, and it didn't make any sense. And my wife came to me like, "Why are you doing this? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? What's wrong with you? Like, once in a while, you do this stupid thing." And I'm like, I actually don't know. And it took me 2 days of different meditations, and one day I was sitting outside, and suddenly they hit me like a rock. My mother died when I was 25, right? But my mother had always licorice in her purse, and every time I would meet my mother, she would like pass me a different type of licorice. So deep inside of me, it was this longing for my mother that once in a while came out in licorice, and then I couldn't help myself, right? And once I had that epiphany, like, oof, what? After that, I don't need to binge eat licorice anymore. It's just like I lost it, right? So very often there are these kind of behaviors like, oh, why don't you just stop? And what is it? And we often don't know until we really go into why is it? What is I'm searching for? And the association with an experience, and that sound, sense, smell, touch, whatever that we know from all the things, that can be licorice for some people, and alcohol to other, wild sound, smell, and it can set people off in wrong directions, right? That are unproductive for themselves. So it is really, that's why I love coaching, because it is a combination of, well, it's a good old tribal bonfire in one way, right? You're sitting there and having this deep conversation, but in a different way, right? And personally, I prefer a solution-focused approach to coaching or counseling. Also, as a pastor, I use solution-focused pastoral counseling. That is Charles Allen Collar, who wrote a very good book and a study on this, right? That I studied and learned in my pastoral, and I used that. And for me, that is better than looking back. But there is a time when you have a problem where people can move past it. You also realize that, okay, maybe we can't always just look at the solution. Maybe we have to see where does this problem actually come from, like you just said before, Darren. Is like why, what caused this? Where did you first learn this behavior? Who taught you this, right? And then you can move on from there, right? So there are the two sides. I think there's the point of actually focusing on what works, but there's also sometimes where it's like, yeah, but this is a block, and we need to solve that block, and then we can figure out where it's from. We don't need to talk it to death. I don't believe in that. I have very bad experiences with this. I've seen very bad experiences with all these kind of like prolonged exposure and digging into the past for long. In my opinion, it doesn't work. In my experience, it doesn't work. It only can desensitize people to an event, but it doesn't solve it, in my opinion. It doesn't produce anything of productive things. So I'm very skeptical, and I have a very negative sort of aspect to that kind of exposure therapy or group counseling where people come together and well is sort of in their problems and associate with their problem and keep on to that. Which is also why I personally is not fond of the AA culture and the AA society types. I think they can be very useful for the beginning to actually stand up and say, "Hi, my name is Dan. I'm an alcoholic," if that's your issue. But I don't think there's anything productive or anything. It goes against everything we talk about neurolinguistic behavior and everything. To 10 years later, and you haven't drunk for 10 years, and you still stand up and say, "Hey, my name is John. I'm an alcoholic." No, you're not. And why would you put that negative term on you? If your kid would stand up and say, "I'm fat, I'm stupid," you would say, "Don't say that," right? Use positive reinforcement. Somehow we have this whole organization that's based on a negative reinforcement. So I think there are, in my experience, there are some things that work and some things that work better than others. Some things, in my experience, do not work, right? They may, in my opinion, and that's just my experience, of course, I'm expressing that I think they just cover up. It's like pulling a cover over the problem when you're desensitizing people to it, like a prolonged exposure, rather than just, there's no way of going to a rape and trying to, let's talk about it for 200 times until you can get comfortable with it. You should not get comfortable with being raped ever, in my opinion. Should nothing of you be comfortable about that experience or thought or background or something. It just should not. But we can learn to live and put it in the past. Right? So there are different things. I have tried something recently with clients, which is it's called EMDR, which is the eye movement, if you're aware of that, where actually you try, and it's basically just reprogramming your mind, so neurons that fire together, wire together, and so basically you're recalling the memory, but you're putting something positive in it. You're changing your eyes to look at something, but that can be another rephrasing. I just think this is a very simple way to use actually with people. And I found it works fantastic in a very short time. I also had, and this is controversial, very controversial, but I had very good experience with the copying the maps. Are you aware of maps? In North America, they have this multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies, right? And they have done a lot of studies the last decade on MDMA, and ecstasy, but the pure essence MDMA in microdoses, and also with psilocybin in microdoses, and seen tremendous results. And I have with a psychologist I tried to also, which is also my coach for that, I have discussed this, and I have tried myself 2 sessions with microdosing, and I was able to work 2 things that I experienced because I had a very bad childhood. I had all the things that people sit in prison and say is because of my childhood, and I'm like, hey, I can beat you. Like I beat you in every chapter. But I'm still here, so it's not that. But I was able to actually totally rewire my brain to think about it, and this comes into the other thing that comes with the EMDR thing, the eye movement, is it because when you are having that MDMA or psilocybin or something, you're having an experience as well. So while you're processing it in your mind, then you also have an experience, and that causes the neurons to wire together, and you form a new thought. Your mind is actually changed by it right away afterward, right? And therefore you are able to form new neurons, so you can start thinking in new patterns, and that actually helps fantastically. So I'm very whether it's a transformational coaching for business success or it's for solving problems or anything like that, I'm very fond of forming new neurons, right? New neuron pathways, because in my opinion, it is the best way to change your mind, actually, to form it. And you cannot just academically doing it. You need to do it to some sort of exercise where it causes an experience, right?
Mm.
And you come into, he mentioned before, you're in use nature. I have had tremendous result with a client that where we just couldn't he couldn't solve his things, and he tried all sorts of things, and he's very successful leader of a company here in Denmark, but he just couldn't change certain aspects of his life, and tried all sorts of things. And one day I said to him, well, next Saturday, I'm coming to pick you up, and you're going to come with me, and you're not going to ask any questions, and we're just going to talk, right? And you're going to do what I say. And do you trust me? And I was like, okay. Yeah. And we went for a walk in a very lovely park we have here, which is a big nature reserve with deers and everything, and by a lake, fantastic. And I broke a sort of ethical code, and I passed him something and I said, here is a microdoses of MDMA, and I want you to swallow it now. Drink some water, and then we'll go around and talk. And then, just like when I tried it at home, I tried it out in my garden in the daytime, right? And then I had this fantastic nature experience on top of, I already love nature, but then, and I work with nature, I have a nature conservation agency as an entrepreneur as well. And I had this tremendous, and while walking with him there, 1 hour, we found the reason, we solved the issue. We took up the phone, we called people, had a whole different serotonin endorphins or a conversation with them we never had before, and formed new neurons because of the experience and the walk and the nature and all this kind of, just put it right back. That's where the problem is. I'm sorry, this is where it caused it. Now I understand. And he solved the problem. But this guy had tried this for 20 years to solve his problem, right? And in very short time, we could do this. And we can have all sorts of different issues, but I actually think nature is one of the best way. And I would wish more often that coaching, like we do, would go on outside, or even the psychologists would be outside walking in the forest or sitting by the river or something, because we know from research as well that it has a tremendous healing effect on our mind and body, right? And so, but we don't do that, right? We sit in the office, or we sit like this on screen and look at each other, and there's no, we also have research on that today, that we don't release the same hormones in our mind when we're sitting here face to face to a screen as we would do if we were in each other's presence. And so it is a scary thing. And like, all those fantastic, we can now meet from different countries and sit here together and have this dialogue. Then we also have to realize that it's also robbing us of something, right? It's robbing of this being close to another human being, being in the electromagnetic field or whatever we give off that we can actually feel, and we know we can sense it today. There's a lot of research on it. It's no longer just crazy people and hippies that believe it. It's a reality, right? And I also think that, of course, MDMA releases hormones that you already have in your brain. So it's a natural release, although it's a chemical compound. I agree with that. That's why I would actually maybe think the future will be the psilocybin, which has come from the mushrooms, which are fungus, is such a great part of our nature, and again, natural part. Or people have great result with ayahuasca, for instance, which I have experience with and haven't tried. But also we have seen tremendous result for people there that are sort of, well, addicts in many ways, right? You can really get tremendous results for that. And I know in the United States, and in North America, Canada also, they have fantastic research with PTSD for soldiers with MDMA, right? And also psilocybin. And in such a short time compared to ever before, right? So I think there are a lot of things we can do. I think all the start is always talking about it, getting to express it. And most of the time that will actually work fantastically for people, just being heard, just somebody to listen and feel what you say and what you feel. But at some times it has left so deep scars that it needs something else. And then you can try different behavioral therapies, CBT or NLP or whatever works. But for some people, I think that there might be the alternative track where you might go outside and say, okay, let's try this one.
Yeah.
I'm very strict on all the research goes directly to microdosing. So for a man, a normal man, it will be from 75 to 100 milligrams. So it's like 1/5 to 1/10 of a party dose, right? Because it's not the purpose of being out of your mind, right? It's a purpose of actually remaining in your mind, but having enough of something that releases in your body that you don't already have, so you can deal with this. You don't feel fear, you don't feel stress, you don't feel anxiety, because that's what that actually do, those two drugs, right? And that can cause the healing, right in that moment. So, but microdosing, I'm not saying go pop some ecstasy. So,
I'm very anti-drug, Dan. I'm very anti-drug.
Yeah.
No, but I,
for instance, but I deal with what is a drug and what is a medicine. So I'm very against all sort of mental disease drugs. Medicine is antidepressives, anti-anxiety. They, if you read the warning labels that come with those, they are horrible. And in many cases, they make everything worse in a long time. I can agree with it for deep depression for a certain time and experience that shows it, but that is not for living your life. It is for a very short period of your life. We need to find our solution. So I actually agree with you, and I was very against drugs myself. But the question is, what is a drug, right? And I think we need to reshape our Western culture. So what is a drug, right? Because the most common drug that almost all people use in the Western world is called alcohol. And alcohol actually is one of the worst drugs you can use. And if anything should be banned, it should be alcohol next to sugar. And then, so whereas maybe doing LSD or MDMA and microdoses is actually far, far better than having a pint at the pub, right? But in our culture, the other thing is more accepted. Which is
yeah. Don't ban beer just yet. Don't ban beer just yet.
No, but I think is that we know the same. It's like one glass of red wine has tremendous wonders for your conversation, and you can have really philosophical conversations. But after the third glass, you are having a stupid conversation, right? And then it goes downhill from there. Right? So there is the level always of where you can use something for an advantage because it caused a certain release of things in your body. It has an effect on your body that you need, right? Outside your mind, right? Because there is the mind, body, spirit, and we can debate spirit, but or higher consciousness, what you want to call it. Right? Of course, I'm a pastor, so I have that kind of idea. But I would also say that one overlooked factor today also that maybe don't cause it, but definitely compounds the effects of depression or anxiety, stress, etc., is your microbiome. And people forget that your gut health has a tremendous effect. So your lifestyle has tremendous effect on your mental health. And it cannot, it's not two separate things. You need to learn to look at it. Right? So if you're having one sort of problem, whether it's a physical problem, or then you need to look at your mental things too. If you have a mental problem, you also need to look at your physical problems because there's very often a direct connection between the two, right? And as we see, as people spiral into stress, anxiety, depression, they very often, nearly always, change also their food intake and alcohol intake and drink intake into a negative direction as well, going from a healthy to a fast food junk, something instant regret, and which then causes a huge problem in your microbiome and the release of the wrong sorts of hormones in your brain, right? So it is really I think it is a great thing. We need to be a little bit more holistic in our approach, and that's what we're learning through science today. Science actually that's coming back and saying MDMA is good for you, psilocybin is good for you in small amounts, mushrooms is really good for you. You should eat more mushrooms, right, etc. So, and I'm not talking about the magic one. I'm talking about the normal one. There's all the different culinary mushrooms you have, right? Fantastic healing effects on your brain, and realize also that a lot of people with trauma or bad behaviors, as we call them, are actually having a hidden trauma, or they're having brain damage as well, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with Daniel Amen is a very, very good American studies. He's a psychiatrist, but he's also, he started as a combat medic. I didn't know anyone, and then he became an X-ray technician, and from there went into brain scans, right? And through brain scanning, then he goes in with the head that he started talking psychiatry, and now he's one of the best known in the world in this, and has the largest database of brain scans by anyone in the world, and he's written extensively on it. There's some very good YouTube videos of him, but they're getting a bit old. They have done 80,000. He's about now 230,000 brain scans. But what I'm coming to slowly is that when he is dealing with very children or teenagers that are really behaving weird and strangely, or when he has gone to all the bad prison wards, to the people that commit homicide or horrible job, when he scans them, and this is the thing about all the prisoners, the interesting thing, we're not talking about 10%, 20%, 80%. We're not talking about anything. We're talking about 100% of them so far has had brain damage you could actually see on the picture that actually correlated with their behavior. And so then we come back to sort of Christian thing, you shouldn't judge people, you should give them a chance. And they are then working now in his institution on learning how to rebuild your brain, because now we know you can rebuild your brain. You're not born with the amount of brain cells you think you have. This is a long thing. We have proven that's wrong. Just like any other muscle, you can train and rebuild it. And now they're actually rebuilding it, and they're seeing tremendous effect on these people that used to have bad behavior. Now it's now going away. And you hear it from people say, oh, this kid, he's just been a bat since he was a child. And then you go like, yeah, so what? He hit his head when he was a kid? And probably he did, right? Because it's very common for us, the children. We have very big heads as toddlers. We bunk it into all sort of thing. And it takes very little to cause a brain damage that can affect your whole behavior after that. And you have nothing, you can't do anything about it. It's not your fault anymore, right? It happened to you. And it doesn't help to tell the child that had a brain damage or a teenager, oh, you need to grow up, you need to respect, you need to change your behavior. You're doing the wrong thing. Well, you're shaming him for, it's like telling a handicapped person, you just need to get up and run. I know you're not having legs. Run to the stumps, boy, get it going, get it moving, don't be lazy. It's the wrong way. So I think we have to look very deeply at people, find out where does it cause? Where does this come from? Right? What caused it in the first place? Or I stare and say, well, how did you learn that? Who taught you that? Right? And figure it out and then move from there. And if it's brain damage, then you need to start working on that area. If it is your microbiome, then you need to work on that one as well. If it is mental things, then you need to work on that, and your thought pattern, and realize that thoughts leads to emotions, and emotion leads to actions. If you're having the wrong actions, the wrong behavior, then you need to go back and look at your thoughts, because they were the origin of it. It started there. Change your mind. Change your mind about things. How you think about things. What kind of language you have with yourself, right? Just you have the same language with other people, right? So, right, the older dads are, oh, he's only bad with alcohol, and then it's like, oh, well, there's something going on in there, because the alcohol is only releasing it, it's not creating it, right? So yeah, that's my thing, and that's kind of my take on PTSD and behavior and working with people. And as a transformational coach, I'm prepared to try a lot of different ways. I start with why, finding out what is your why. And then we often find out that your why and your values, that there's a reason for them that caused them. And they can sometimes be productive for you, but very often they're not productive, they're unproductive, and they keep you back or hold you in check or prevent you from doing certain things that you actually want to change and grow with. And so you need to go down to your pain and pleasure, or pleasure or pain, or I prefer to call it pleasure and fear, because it's usually all fear-based. It's the fear of something that causes you to behave a certain way, or what is it you want to attract and what is it you want to avoid, and then find out why is that, because it's always very curious when you see, oh, why do you want to, oh, I just never want to be poor. I never want to be that. I was just like, okay. And usually that ends up with somewhere in the back, there was a bad time where mom and dad couldn't pay the electricity bill or something, right? And or somebody said something, and it's like, where did you learn that, right? And once you can release them from that, and they can grow and move on, then life becomes much easier. And we can all have success. There's nobody out there who cannot have success, right? There's nobody out there who's born stupid, basically, unless you're having some birth defect, right? But if you don't have that, then your mind is a muscle, your brain is a muscle, and can be trained like everything else. So we can train you to become anybody you want. Right? Einstein was considered stupid while he was in school and would never amount to anything. Well, it shows a good effect of well, you are, wrong motivation.
I think that's been proven by a lot of people to be wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, exactly, right. But that was that current view at that time, right? And that's again how we judge people, right? And it's the interesting thing. A lot of people we consider great in the world and in history, if we look carefully at their lives, you can clearly see that they had some huge issues with ADHD or autism or spectrum disorders or something, right? And like huge anxiety issues or something that very often falls together. And at that time, it just wasn't known. It was just the odd one, they were just the oddball, but they weren't. They had some issues. And the funny thing is still, but they left a tremendous mark, right? And they wouldn't have been allowed. And many of them today, they would have been medicated away, So, yeah, and we wouldn't have had them. We wouldn't have had Amadeus. If he had been alive today, he would have been treated with something in school. And so give him some behavior and then sit still and stop doing it. We don't know a lot of these people that have invented things. Leonardo da Vinci would not run around and invent stupid things. You would tell them to sit down and listen to your teacher. Right? Stop doing stupid things. You cannot make a helicopter. No, you can't. But several hundred years later, we could. so I mean that's the thing. We have to be very careful about how we restrict people, but also just treat people like they're a human being, like the divine spark. And when you do that, then if you look at it that way, then they're all your brothers and sisters, then you will care. And once you care, you can help everybody. And that's my opinion. It doesn't need a special education for it. Although, of course, it definitely doesn't hurt to have it. It always helps to the more you study. But everyone can help and everyone will treat them. It's just a question of having the courage to do it, right? Or
I mean, that comes both sides, though, doesn't it, Dan? I mean, it's the courage to be able to get that help, but it's also the courage to ask for it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. That's why you need a tribe. The tribe, because if you have a close tribe, the tribe will notice that there's something wrong with you, right? And just like you and I from our sort of security background, you notice when one of your team, because you're like, it's same like in the military, you're such a close group and you're so close together, and you start noticing, hey, Jack's having a bad day, let's back him up, right? All right. So then you take over and you do a little bit of the chores that day, right? Because you need to, because you back each other up, because one day that guy's going to have your back, right? And so we form this tight-knit situation, and we actually notice, you can feel right away, what's wrong, right? And then, but then once you use the armed forces and you leave them, you often have problems finding that same sort of thing. But the same happened to people that's been on the sports team, right? Where they form really, really tight bonds, and they have known structures. They know what is my role, what is your role, and we do this together, and we're a team, and you together. And then they grow up and they go to school, and then they lose this, and then suddenly they're having a problem, because what they learned through their teenage years was to speak with the coach or speak with the team or chat out or do something in trading, and then you get it over it, and now they don't have that anymore, and then they don't know how to solve their issues anymore, right? So because they lost the tribe. And it's a huge concern today, I think, this tribal thing and a loss of community in general, right? You care about other people, right? And I'm so old that when I'm so old that when I was a kid, everyone knew their neighbors. Like 5 kilometers away, you knew the people in the farm or something. You knew their name, and you could see them on the street, and you could say hi or something if you live there. And if you lived in the city, you knew everybody in your stairway, right? Everybody, intimately, and then you knew the next doors too, right? That kind of thing. Today, you don't remember the name on their mailbox, right? And you don't see them. And if you see them in the stairways, it's like Curtis Norton, bang, out again, right? It's like we lost that, right? As well. And that's another scary part, right? And if you're living out in the suburbs, right? If you start looking today, everybody is having basically walled facades around their garden, right? Where we used to have maybe a little hedge or a little picket fence or something, or nothing, just an open plain, a field, like a garden, will come in. And now it's like, this is my area, it's demarcated zones, right? And so you left, but it is, this is really becoming demarcated zones, right? Don't cross my lawn, right? Whereas when I was a child, you would run across the lawn of the neighbor to knock on the door and ask if his kid was home or something. And there wouldn't be anybody saying, hey, get off my lawn. And you wouldn't have to stand up and ring on the bell, right? You could actually even open the door and pop your head in and say, hey, anybody home, right? And we have lost that. And it's a detriment to society, right? We become indifferent because of it.
It's like also, this whole connection, not that we just lost connection with each other, also with ourselves and with nature. And I've just traveled around Central America for the last 8 months, and I actually did an ayahuasca ceremony with a shaman from Peru. Yeah. And it was amazing, like this experience, this connection, this deep connection that I was having with myself, seeing my childhood and seeing my deeply rooted limiting belief. It was just mind-blowing. And also learning from the shaman how they are connected with nature and with each other in the community. We are so far in the Western world from this connection. And so I can totally relate to what you just mentioned. And I think this is what I also see in nature coaching and with the forest bathing that I do. It really helps people to disconnect from the phone, from the digital life, and deeply reconnect with themselves and with nature as well. Yeah, and it's Absolutely. So important.
Actually, I totally agree with this, and this is a huge, and we know it from research. Just simply walking in nature will lower your cortisol level, right away. It lowers it. It lowers your stress right away. It lowers the bad hormones anyway. And so it's really, really important. And we all know that you can go angry out for a walk, but it's very rarely you return angry from a walk, right?
Exactly.
So it's really and that's another thing we also lost that one, because walking in, we used to have much more cities or lived on the country. We used to have more nature around us, and the very fact of coming off from work, maybe a stressful environment, getting off the train in the communal days. We didn't all bring cars and then walk from that to home. Just those 5 minutes of walk could actually do wonders for how you came back to the family. Whereas today, you arrive snap home in your car, and in your car, you're listening to something anyway, all the time, right? And you have it in your ears, and you're on the phone, and you're talking, and you come, and then you step through the door, and everything, the stress that was with your life, is just brought right back you because you lost touch with nature. If everybody had to walk to a park on the way home, we would have far fewer problems.
Yeah. So true. I think that's why it's so important that people do a ritual, from between work and coming home, to really leave the stress behind and step over the door and say, okay, now it's a different setting, different atmosphere, different vibe.
Yeah,
I was going to, sorry, Dan, I was just going to say, it just reminded me that there was a careers coaching company I was working for, and I brought this issue up about working from home. The fact that you're dealing with people, in a careers coaching session, you may well know, is you can get a lot of people who are very angry, and they take that anger on you. They take it personally, and you're trying to get them the best to help they can, but they kind of deflect that and put, their issues onto you. Now, when you're working in an environment that we're in now, on Zoom or Teams or everything like that, or on the telephone, you're talking to someone on the telephone, but you're stuck in your house. Now, from there, you might finish. Now, most people finish at 5. Careers coaching, your chances are you're still working at 7, 8, sometimes at night when you're doing your paperwork and everything else. Now, if you've had a bad day, where do you take that? You can't take it anywhere, because then you've got to go on and make the dinner. You've got to go and see the family, and you're in that environment straight away. So you're not releasing that negative energy anywhere, because you're going to then take it out on the family because you've had a bad day. But then the families suffer it, or the families the kids might be playing up. So then they take that on you, and you're in that environment. You're not getting out of it. Yeah. So it was, to me, it was that the company needs to take or companies need to take a look at when people are working at home, they need to have that space between ending the work and enjoying the family, because they're going to carry on that stress throughout the rest of the night. And then it just carries on and carries on and carries on. And there's just never any end of it. I think with nature coaching is that you don't have that, and I'm, please excuse me if I'm saying it wrong, but I feel that, listening to you talking about that, you don't have that chance to hide when you're in the nature. You've got that person with you, you can talk and you can release things. Yet where we're at home and working on Zoom and stuff like that, you can turn your screen off, you can turn the microphone off, you can go and do your washing or your shopping or whatever, and then come back and everyone's still on the meeting, still going over all the data and everything. So you're not losing it. So you can't get away from it.
Exactly.
When you're in the nature. So you have to be able to open yourself up and you have to be able to express what's going on. Mm-hmm. But where the society we are now, we're not able to do that because we're in that environment 24/7.
Yeah, but that's also why we've seen, in my opinion, we've seen an increase in all sorts of mental disorders after COVID, because COVID trapped us in we weren't prepared for, and we trapped a lot of people with mental disorders at home with each other, and then we invented this increased this work from home thing, and now people are not having any social calls with Claire at the coffee machines anymore. They don't have that time to chat and meet and see other things because they're just at home all the time. And as Darren pointed out, then you're on stressful calls all the time, and you have stressful things. And then suddenly it's always 5 o'clock off, start off computer. And now I'm still right here. I'm still in the same environment. I'm still in the same cortisol level, but now I need to go and have dinner with the kids, right? And it just doesn't work, right? Or help them with their schoolwork, and you're just like, you're still there, because you haven't left, right? You haven't left work yet. You haven't returned to home, and that's why I personally, I tried it before in my life when I was consultant. I was working from home, but working from home, in my opinion, is not a good thing, because it's really it takes a lot of discipline to break it and say, no, you basically have to have a bungalow in the garden where you call, okay, this is the office, and I'm no longer in the office, right? But there's the thing, and there's always the thing, this little, I just need to drop back up and look at my thing or something. Whereas you're not going to drop back into the office. There's like a 20 minutes commute away, you're not going to do that. So, but you will do it at home, and it's very hard to pull away from that temptation there to solve it, and the press from the company calling around. Well, you're still basically in front of it. I know you're at home, so you have your computers, you can check it on your phone, right? Whereas if you've gone home from the office, you can also say, oh, I don't have my work PC. Sorry, I don't have, can't, right? So we also extended the period of when we expect people to retire. And I have worked with a lot of leaders and managers who are getting text and messages from everybody in the organization far outside their work, right? Areas, our work hours, they're still out there. They're still sending things. You don't get off it anymore, right? And so there are, like Darren said, I think corporate issues are really big. We need to work on today, and they're really hard for people that has any sort of, well, either weaknesses, mental weakness, or mental disorders, any type of form. That's really hard for them. It takes a very strong person to constantly have the attention and the grab and the notifications and the notification and then still being able to be with your family, right? And just like, I'm off, right? And particularly like us, which are also,
I think this company we're
what do you say?
Yeah, sorry, mate. Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we're thinking of it. The company was trying to offer different things, services, and there was a particular one where there was somebody was doing online yoga classes or Pilates classes or something, and I was saying, well, why are you doing that in the middle of the day when you've got things going on? When you've got a work life, you've got to get on with that. Why don't you do it at the end of the day, which gives people that chance to take a break the state of being in work, do some sort of, whether it be yoga, Pilates or something, or an exercise, to then give you that break of work and then into family life. Because then you're not carrying, you can get all the stress out of yourself by doing the exercise or the yoga and relaxing, and then you're real ready for your home life.
Yeah.
You know, why are we not doing it at that time rather than somebody rushing around trying to spend half an hour of a lunch break to actually try and get something to eat? You know, they've got so many targets to reach. They haven't got the time to do a yoga in the class in the middle of the day. Yeah. Do it at the end of the day where people go, right, stop, get off your phone, get off the computer. Well, stay on the computer because you're going to do an online yoga class. But, you know, you can take that time then to have this break, and then you can move into your regular life, your family life, with a much better, clearer mind.
Yeah, and also maybe corporate take the decisions to make this a mandatory 3 days a week thing, so that you stop at 3 p.m. and you take 1 hour of going to the gym or to the yoga class or Pilates or whatever. So it's not a choice, because otherwise you might just, if I can leave at 3, then I'll just run home 1 hour earlier, and you don't get that thing, and you still bring the thing right home, or you do something else, or you keep working, right? And so it's also that thing, because it's very hard for people in the beginning to learn the right disciplines, right? To have the discipline to say, I will commit to the Pilates class or the yoga class or the coaching or the gym, and that's why people start the gym on the 1st of January and by mid-March they're not showing up anymore, right? because just actually by mid-February they're hardly showing up anymore. By mid-March they're sort of giving up totally, right? But they still pay their subscription. And it's the same thing, because we didn't have time to actually change your mind to it. It was just this why wasn't important enough, right? The reason for losing 10 pounds wasn't that important to you in your mind, that you were willing to give up the other things that you forgot to downsize in order to have time for the gym and to do these things, right? And so there is a much more to it than you're just doing. And that's why I like transformational coaching, because you work with transforming people, and I would actually, it's very hard in this country, but I would actually suggest that everybody who has problems that they've been dealing with for a prolonged period, and if you're having the same problem for a decade in your sort of behavior, then maybe you should take a trip to Peru, you know, and go to the forest and try ayahuasca. So because I know, like, about, I mean, at least 10 people that's done this, right? And I haven't had time myself to do it, and I don't want to do one of those. I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, we can do it here, we have some, and I was like, no, you know, we won't do that thing, it belongs down in South America. We'll go and do it right, yeah. But it's I think it's something we need to, and we need to work on and take our time and deal with your issue. If you had it for as long, and then you need to fix it somewhere. And I think it's a great way to solve it. And I think it's a natural way to solve it, in my opinion. And I used to be totally anti-drug. For some reason, I never did drugs in my whole life, you know. And it's like, a year ago, I tried MDMA, you know, for microdosing after having studied a lot and trying to work with other people and trying to find solutions. And I tried it myself, and I was like, wow, my God, why isn't this a much more prevalent solution, right? Oh, it takes a lot of time. And then I have tried it with people, right? They, of course, only with this guy I tricked her, but everybody else I have told to get it themselves, and then I'll guide you how to use it, right? But it would be better if we didn't have to it. But the problem is, how do you get someone who didn't learn empathy or compassion or love, or was neglected as a child? You can't tell them just to think happy thoughts and feel love, because they don't know yet how. You know, they haven't formed the neurons for that behavior, that pathway, right? So although they can feel joy, they're connected with this issue of how to solve it. But then you can give them a mushroom or an LSD or MDMA or ayahuasca, and then you can have that instant, and you have an experience, and you have formed new neuron pathway, and it's much easier to continue because you actually have a pathway now, and the experience was so strong that they're solidly wired, and they're together, these neurons, right? And then you see change, and it's fantastic. And you can do the same in nature. It's an experience too, going through nature, taking people out normal life, right? We used to have in Denmark here, we used to have an ex-special forces officer who used to run all this sort of retreat for people with stress leaders. where he would basically put a hood on them. They would be blindfolded for hours, walking around and doing things, and it was horrible, right? And it's stressful. And then you sit them down on this nice, fantastic mountainside with this fantastic view, and turn on some very good classic music and drop the hood off them right away, and they just boom, got this image, right? And they got transport from their dark sphere into this heavenly thing, and just the neurons changed there. There was this experience. It became so fantastic, right? And for instance, I can tell you down, we don't have to mention his name here, but the old good guy, the tough guy that was running these courses down WFB, I had him up visiting me in Iceland once, and I took him to Þingvellir, this national park. And this guy's a tough guy, and I took him there. And we were showing him around. He sat down there, and for a while, and he was just sitting, and he kept sitting on the same lava rock, looking at his view. And I was like, okay, so it's just my life, you know. It's been so many things, you know. And I just look here, and it's so beautiful, so peaceful. And I'm thinking, why have I done these things? And I was like, and he had like this whole epiphany right there, you know, from a very simple thing, like a whole thing. And it was like, it was his all by himself, you know, and I agree with it. It is what we do. And we lost that today, most of us, and we don't have time for it. And when we go some places, when you see people travel today, they're all running to the side, and then they turn their back to the side, and they're having their phones and taking the selfie with the thing in the background, rather than put that thing away and enjoy the moment and be in the moment and look at it, right? Instead, you're there. What I need to put it on social media that I'm here, right? Rather than just being there, and that's it's a huge thing, isn't it? So, do you have a selfie from your ayahuasca?
No, I don't.
It's not the selfie mode time, right? And that's the thing, right? Because when you're doing something real, you're not going to pick up that phone, right? So, right. So there's huge things in society and culture. Like the joke goes around when you looked at your grandma's photo album, you were like, who is this person? Where are they? What are they doing? And now you're going to have to look at the Instagram page or something, and it's like, oh, Mom, great life you had. I saw your dinner Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's like, you have a life. Food porn. It's like, where did life go? You know, like, right? And there is really that thing. We're doing a different thing, right? We're living differently, and I agree. We need to go back, right?
Yeah.
In many ways, but have an open mind, travel the world to see. And that's also the thing, that there's no ignorant world traveler, as they say, right? Because as soon as you go somewhere else, experience something else, different culture, different views, different things, your neurons will fire together, you know? Wire together and fire together, and they will change, right? And then you have a new experience. So when you return, you're not the same person that left, and you can never go back, right? You can just never go back. You already changed. And that's, of course, why it's so hard once people have traveled a lot to come back to their old environment or their old neighborhood or their settle down, because they're just like, the thing. When you meet the people that didn't leave, you know, you're like, what? You're still here? You're still stuck in this, right?
On the hamster wheel.
Yeah, but it's sad. But it's also, the sad thing is that you have changed that much, and that's the important thing of actually travel, is that you change, right? Just like I can't no longer identify myself as Danish or Icelandic or anything. You know, I find it very hard when people ask me, you know, what nationality is. I was like, well, my passport is Danish, right? But that's about where it goes. I don't feel nationalistic anymore. Right? And I learned one thing from Darren, because it was one thing I learned from traveling around the world, is also that what I used to think of what we did in the armed forces was great. And now I travel the world in a private position, and I come to understand that in other parts of the world, we are seen as evil, right? We are seen as an enemy. People are afraid of us, literally afraid of us, right? People literally have trauma and PTSD thinking about what we're going to come and do to their country, right? And here we are talking about democracy and peace, right? And so PTSD and trauma is very, very, very different from people, right? And where they experience it. I have experiences myself, of course, in my security career, higher security career, with with people dying and blood and brain cells splattering around and the death, being part of it, but also mutilation, but constant threat and constant anxiety from that, etc. Which is just part of it. We call it having your sixth sense and being awake and sleeping with one eye closed and all that. But it's unnatural and it's really bad and it's really stressful. And then we can say someone has to do what we do, and I agree, and it's very important what we do, but it comes at a tremendous human cost to ourselves and emotional cost to ourselves and to our families, right? What we did in our lives. And that's why I think a lot of soldiers also have, police officers have huge problem, traumatic event that they have brought home and they don't know how to release, right? And they're told to man up and deal with it, or get the mandatory 3 hours at the psychologist, which everybody hates, because they didn't choose it, right? And that's the thing, you have to choose your own treatment. It cannot be chosen for you. It's very hard. It's very rare that actually it works, in my experience, right? You have to choose your own coach or your own psychologist, and you have to choose when you want to go for help. If you're forced to it, it won't help, right? Or you'll
Transformational coaching.
Yeah.
What is it? What is different between transformational coaching and NLP coaching or any other kind of coaching? What is the difference?
Well, in some ways, I would probably say it's a play with words as a difference, because it's very hard to say there's a real difference. Of course, the difference lies in that I'm looking for a transformational change, like something you really want to change in your life. I'm not really interested in, if you want to set a goal, I would like to, set a goal of attending the gym 3 times a week or something. That's great for you, but that would maybe not be something I'm interested. I would not be very interested in a CEO who said to me, I want you to help me with creating a 10% more profit next year. I would say, yeah, okay, that's great for you, but that's not what I'm interested in, right? So if you want to transform your company, if you want to transform your life, if you want to really change something, experience something, then I'm willing to work with you, because that's what I'm looking for. That's where I'm interested in. For me, it has to have an impact. And I think transformational coaching in that sense is that it's different, because it's looking for the transformation of your mind, that your mind changes your perceptions, your ideas, your thoughts about whole life. You really take a hard look at it. But transformational coaching in itself is, of course, just a modern name to a new term to something that's been known for a long time, and you could have that in many places, right? So we would like to come up with things, but I think it's more, to be honest, it's more how we differentiate ourselves as coaches, right? When somebody can be a career coach and deal particularly with the career, or life coach deals primarily maybe with life, love, and having a family, right? But where I would say that then as a transformational coach, I deal with transforming your life, right? And I deal with the mind, body, and spirit. It has to be a whole thing. You can't just, in my opinion, that's just my opinion. But I would feel that career coaching would be something limiting for me, because I would only be dealing with one part of your life, right? Whereas that would mean, like, I think it would come naturally if you did transformational coaching. You might also change your career and your life and your happiness and your relationship as well. So I start with why, finding out your why, your values and your ethics and your everything. What is your vision for life? What is your mission, right? And we go through that, and we go through questions, and I have people write down what they want in their life. What kind of love life do you have? What kind of marriage do you want if you're married? What kind of father do you want to be if you're a father or mother? What kind of co-worker do you want to be? What kind of boss do you want to be? What kind of everything, what kind of relationship do you want to have with different loved ones or family members or society, etc.? What do you want to change? And then write it down. And I always tell people, if you're in a relationship, and most people are, in a relationship, and you need to do the same exercise with your spouse. And then you need to look, because if you find out that you are having 2 widely different things, then you're going to have to compromise. But it doesn't show up before you actually figure out that, but I actually thought we were working in this direction. And I see that very often when I have counseling, dealing with people, the pastor in counseling, marriage counseling, but I thought we had agreed to this. And why would you think that? We were clearly going here. And then, because they've never taken time to do that, transforming the mind, sitting down, what is it I want? Who am I as a person? What do I want to achieve? Why do I want to achieve it? What do I want to avoid? Why do I want to avoid it? And sometimes that is a rational thing. Very often is an irrational thing because it comes from fears of something you don't want to, and there's a reason why you want something. And then when you coach them to that, they actually change. And very rarely will I see over a year, some people are much shorter depending on what the problems are, but when you engage people over a year, it's very rarely that you see that the original goal or idea or vision they had is the same one they have after a year, because they have changed and they've changed their life. And they now realize that what I thought I wanted wasn't really what I wanted. Right? And I see that with a very common in life, that you somehow get formed in your teenage years, maybe by your parents, maybe by your siblings, maybe by your friends, maybe by your teachers, and you take a certain educational direction that you later find out this is just not you. It is not who you are at all, right? And it's another thing that when I ask people, so tell me about you. Well, I'm an engineer. All right. So what does that mean? I'm an electrician. Really? So what? You're a screwdriver or an applier, or is that you? Or because that's not you. That's your title. That is what you do for a living. Like, you told me who you are. Right? I want to know who you are. And that's a huge thing. And most people are not used to answering those questions. Who am I? Like, nobody asked me, who am I? I haven't been asked that, right? What do we ask children when they're in kindergarten? What do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to do? A truck driver. Okay, but why are you putting in that position? Why are you trying to make them choose something as a child in a kindergarten, what they want to be when they're old? Why you need to help them be in the moment. And if you need to ask them something in the future, ask them, what would you like to change in the future if you could change something, right? And then you will get a whole more creative idea than just the 3-4 sort of general ideas they have from their family or relations, or what is a good career choice, what mom and dad can do, right? Because that's usually the problem, right? So I think we need to reform people's mind, and that's transformational. That's my idea. That's why I use transformational change of mind, and that comes with knowing yourself and going deep inside. And I would agree with you that one of the best ways to go out in nature, if you can find it, take people for a long walk, think about certain questions, categories. What is you? Take it out there without the phone in your pocket, and then figure it out, right? And then ramble it down on some pages, and I'm a fervent believer in writing. Okay, if you're dyslexic, then fine, I will deal with that. Then use the microphone, or at least use the microphone on your WhatsApp and record it or something. But record it, write it down, because when you write things down, you are also changing neurons. We know that you have better memory of it, and it's more likely that you carry out the goals if you actually write them down. And it's the fact of it. It's not that you're writing it down; it's that the fact of it. It's a motor skill. While your brain's doing it, it becomes an experience, and you put down paper, and that changes your neurons, which is more likely to achieve them, or record them in some way, or paint them what you want to do, because the emotional part is our creative part. It is not in our logical part. And it's very important, therefore, when you want to change people's behavior, it is not the logical approach that will win in the end, because you cannot academically change your mind. You cannot learn something to drive a car by reading academic books about it. You're going to have to sit down in the car. You're going to have to start it. You're going to have to, and you're going to find out reading the book just wasn't prepared for the reality of driving the car. And so you need to have the real experience. And that's why experience comes from vision. And that's also why vision is so great, because it's a creative part in your mind. It's in your right mind in your part where you have that experience. And that's what causes it. And that's what really gives a change. And that can be very hard if you're having the stereotypical executive Excel trained person that's logical minded and does everything with an Excel sheet. And I have had people coming to me counseling when we were told to bring things, and they bring an Excel file, and I were kind of like, all right, I understand your wife is a little bit annoyed with you because it was maybe not the romantic way to solve this. You sat down and calculated on my Excel sheet. But there are people that will do that. I literally had that happen twice, and it's just like you almost fall off your chair laughing. But they meant it well, right? They meant it well, and this was their way of dealing it, because they were all left-brained. Everything went on there, but that was so hard, right? Because in the end, we're not logical beings, we're emotional beings. And that need to be dealt with and deal with the emotional issues first before you deal with the academic issues. And if you have the right emotions, you can learn anything. If you have the wrong emotions, you cannot learn anything. It's a proven fact. I mean, it's not something I say, it's a scientific fact. Right? It really restricts your learning. So joy and happiness is number 1 and 2. If you have joy and happiness, you can learn anything. If you believe it and you're happy about it, you will learn much easier. You know, if you hate that class, you will not learn anything in class, right? Mm. It's just a fact. So I think that is a big problem we have. And that's why I think also in coaching, you have to approach it from the same perspective, that you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with their life, and you're doing it. And I would agree with nature. You know, I hate having to do it screen to screen, but that's very common because I have foreign clients, right? And you're doing this on them, but you just can't have that same relationship. You can't have that same sense of that same being in the presence of the shaman. There is a difference of being with a shaman and then just sitting at home listening to a ritual on ayahuasca and then mixing your own ayahuasca and drinking it. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't. I mean, it just wouldn't. Even if it looked like the fire, but it is just not the same, right?
No, absolutely. Just also the energy of the shaman, you know, like, and the singing and the dancing and the flute playing. It's like the whole setup, this whole energy. It's amazing. Yeah.
And that's an experience, and that changed your neuron, and that will never go away. You change from doing that, and that's why many of these standard sort of treatments, where you just sit in an office with the dull painted walls and no boring paintings, you don't have an experience because there's nothing there to experience, right? Except the thing, and you might not even look at the person. Like in the old days, you were lying on the bench, and the psychologist was looking in the other direction. There was no human relation, right? And it was like. Absolutely, in my opinion, absolutely the wrong way of going about it. You know? Sometimes it helps people to look away because they feel embarrassed or something, but that's only in those situations that's a good thing. Otherwise, I think it's the wrong way. So yeah, sort of call that is what transformational coaching I really believe is finding your why, finding clarity, what your pleasure, what is you want, what is you want to achieve, what is you want to avoid, and why, right? And then finding that out and finding out what are the obstacles to achieving those twos, and then doing them, moving through them, because that's the experience of doing. And through that, you actually change. You don't change before that, right? So by actually doing it. So it's a 4-step process, but it can be very short or very long, depending on the person and then the problem we're dealing with.
You talk about change a lot, and I get it. You're right. There needs to be a change. Talking about tipping point. So, you know, reading the book The Tipping Point by Michael Gladwell where is it the point of needing to change? So when you look at you, I mean, you've had such a diverse career or life in a sense, Dan, you know, working in security and military, pastor, coaching, you can't go any further to a different spectrum altogether. So what was the tipping point for you that made you think, well, I'm going to go into transformational coaching?
Well, as a child, of course, I was raised with learn to defend your country, and my grandfather was in part of the communist resistance in Denmark, right? And told me to hate Germans, and they will come back. Always learn to defend your country because the Germans will be back, right? And I really didn't like Germans until I became an adult man and actually traveled to Germany and figured out they were quite nice people. So, and that's a kind of
Alexander's a lovely person. She's a lovely person, really is, honestly.
Now I live in South Jutland, we have a lot of German people, right? And we move across, and the people here speak German fluently, and the Germans across the border speak Danish fluently. So it's a totally different. But my tipping point, actually, I went through the military and security and all that, as I sort of I was set out for. And then I had this tipping point. I always had this for spirituality. I read the Bible when I was a kid, mostly to argue with my parents. I was a Christian, you know, because you cannot find everything in the Bible, including the opposite of what anybody says. So I didn't believe in it. But my tipping point, of course, was a huge thing happened for me. When I was 14, I was having this diving competition with my friends, and I wanted to win. And I passed out. I had a drowning. I had a near-death experience. And that changed me because I was a hardcore Darwinist. And at 14, I came home as a hardcore Darwinist with a spirit, a soul. I saw my friends. I heard them speak. I was outside, and I got them resuscitated and brought back to life, and I came back gasping and screaming, and I realized, okay, my consciousness didn't stop with me dying, right? Or stop breathing, at least, or stop my heartbeat. I was still conscious. I could still hear, see, and experience. And so I came home as a Darwinist with a soul, and that changed my life. Right? And that's why I don't have any fear of dying anymore, you know. And I have, instead of embracing that and using it for good, I actually used it for worse, because I went into dangerous situations because I didn't have fear in that sense of dying. I still fear pain, but I didn't have a sense of that. And so I abused it in many ways. And it's like a seesaw, you know, where you go in one direction. And then, as I mentioned on the ship, Kenway Gaia, where I had this experience with a pirate, and I said, if I survive the night, I'll become a priest. I'm going to change my life, and I did, and I signed up for theology and online, and I started studying as soon as I came to Haba and Salalah and Oman, and 3 years later I became pastor of a church in Iceland. But basically, what I did was just change the seesaw and pop it in the other direction. So instead of being physically protecting people, I was now spiritually protecting people. But it was still a seesaw that was out of balance, right? And it has taken me a long time to come back. And then COVID came and took out of this. I was still doing aviation security consulting, but in a civil sense, without carrying weapons, while I was a pastor, because I didn't want to take money for selling the Holy Ghost. There's no wrong with that. So I had to have a job as well. And then COVID came around, took me out of that pastor role, and I was sitting there, what should I do? But I had done a lot of life happiness courses as a pastor, because I realized most people that came to me were actually very unhappy. 80% of my job was talking to people that was unhappy about their life and having traumas and problems, and I had to learn more with that, right? And that's where the coaching thing was born, and I came into that. I took a life coaching course, and then it slowly changed, and as I have changed with my years, and in COVID, I had no job because there was no aviation security consulting. It was dead in this area. And I was stuck in Poland, where I was visiting my wife's family, and we couldn't go home to Iceland. My company there went down because there was nothing to pay. I had long lease contracts and everything. It was like horrible. And I had a call from a friend that was also a bodyguard, that also came the year after to the same course that me and Darren did. And he said, hey, I have a nature protection job. And I said, whoa, I'll pack a backpack. Where are we going? Mozambique? Yeah, I thought we were going to protect a rhino or something, or an elephant or something. I was like, I'm ready to go, you know. And he said, oh, we're going to Arpenrad in Denmark. And I was like, what the F are we going to do there? I was like, well, it's actually conservation. We're going to be opening rivers and water courses and protecting them and felling trees. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, here's me in COVID with nothing to do. And so I bought a car and I drove through Poland, Germany into Denmark, and came to South Jutland for the first time in my life, and started working. And the first day, I thought, oh, I'm never going to do this stupid job. I'll do it for 1 week just for the honor. And then after a week, I thought, I'll do it for a month just for the honor of the guy who brought me here. And then COVID didn't end, and I just ended up working. And then the company, the main contractor here in all the counties said, Dan, you're actually damn good at this. Can you start a company? And so I was like, there was still COVID. So in 21, I started a company. And today I have 14 employees. And I'm having an entrepreneur company that's felling trees. And felling trees along rivers and cutting bushes and hedges and moving it around to getting it to nature to flow, to help nature, because we're having so much fertilization in our rivers and everything that it's not growing natural and all that. So we are trying to restore it to natural and nature conservation. And we have a lot of invasive species of trees. But just because she's smiling, because she's a nature one, actually, when I did this MDMA on my garden, I had a moment where I wasn't microdosing. I wasn't doing that, but I actually turned around and I was looking at this tree, and I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to cut that big branch of you last summer, but you know, it was necessary because you were like putting shade on my trampoline, you know." And I know that doesn't make any sense to you, but it makes sense to me. But I'm sorry about it. You know? And that was weird because I suddenly just had that connection. It was like, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I shouldn't have done it. And now afterward, because I had this experience with nature, when I go out and lead on my work or something, I'm sometimes like thinking, oh, you know, and I had to look at this tree and think, you're going to have to go. But, you know, it's like putting down rock, you know. So it has changed me also. It's very interesting, you know. So, but I still do it. But now I'm not doing it with joy, you know. I'm not taking selfies of look at the tree going down, like, timber. You know, now I'm like actually sad, but it has to go down. So it's transformational, and I actually feel that my sixth soul from physical to spiritual is now in balance with what we call the mind, body, and spirit, where I'm in the middle. And I think transformational coaching kind of pulls all these three together into one. I'm helping people just like before. I only protected them. Then I helped them spiritually, protect them spiritually. But now I'm in the holistic approach to everything. And I feel that I'm in much more balance, right? And I love it. And that's why it probably just rubs off on my clients, because I am in a happy mode. I am in a joy mode when I'm doing coaching and working with people and trying to help them transform their lives. I'm not trying. I will go the extra mile for them to help them transform their life.
Fantastic. Fantastic. It just reminded me, actually, I remember reading a few years back of a screaming tree. And I always say to people, you need to find a tree. You need to find your screaming tree. And they'll say, what do you mean, a screaming tree? I said, you find a tree, bottom of the garden or in a field or somewhere, just go to it and just scream at it. You know, just shout everything you need to get off your chest and scream. And we call it a screaming tree. So, and that was, again, the nature side of things, to get over your any kind of issues you got, your anxiety, your frustration, your depression. Just scream it, and just call it your screaming tree. Pick a tree anywhere and just go and scream at it. So, yeah, interesting. Entrepreneurship. You sorry?
No.
I've lost you. Alexander's. I can't hear a thing. So you've gone.
Hi, gone. Can you hear me? Or?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Alexandra.
All right. So she's dropped out.
Alexandra's dropped out, so give it a second. You got it? Can you hear her, Dan? Can you hear her speak? There you are.
Yeah, okay. Yep, not sure what happened. Cool. No, I was just saying, and then hug the tree to feel some comfort. Because that's a nice exercise as well, to feel,
yeah,
but no, in my luck, I'll be hugging the tree and the lightning will strike it. So that's just how lucky I am, you know. If it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. But no, it is that connection, and it's great. But I mean, entrepreneurship then. So where have you say you're an entrepreneur, you've built up this business, you've built up different side of things. How has that turned out for you, and what is it you've done, you know, to become an entrepreneur?
I think my success comes from what I learned in security, which is courage, right? Self-respect is what you learn in the military, and that leads to self-esteem, and I would say, and self-esteem leads to self-confidence, and from self-confidence, courage is born, and that gives you the courage to do things that other people don't dare to do, including entrepreneurship, but also to take the hard decisions when they need to do so. So this is why often we see that it's very easy. Well, a lot of military people, security people that have been abroad have a good sort of way to transition into the corporate sector, because they used to take decisions and make decisions, right? And be confident in their ability to navigate the right route and change course when they get lost, right? So we learn that. So we're not afraid of those failures, because we know there's no failure except not to try. That is a real failure, right? So who dares wins is like a great adage from the UK, right? The SAS, right? It's the truth. Who dares wins. Yeah, you need to dare to go out to win. So that has helped me tremendously as an entrepreneur. But what is holding me back as an entrepreneur, that other way, is that I don't really have a lot for money. So I don't really, that's not good. And I have made that mistake a couple of times in my life, where I've been like, I've been really inspired to set goals, and I set like financial goals, and we're going to achieve this by this day, and then I'm like, and after I'm looking, I realize they're not really inspiring me, the goals. But then if I set goals, I'm going to hire one more person every 3 months or something, that's something inspiring to me, because then I'll go and find that person and I'll build them and it'll be part of the team. That's far more. So it's another thing, is that you also have to find your weaknesses and your strengths. It's like what works for you. But it has been good for me, and mostly because I have the ability to speak to people, also when they're angry, and I care for everyone, basically, including my employees. Sometimes too much. I have to learn boundaries also. Where you cannot hug your employees too much, because they become too friendly with you and you lose respect. So there has to be this kind of level, right? But it had helped me a lot, and it become a 7-figure business in 3 years, right? And grown every year, and we still grow, and then I have more requests than I can handle, right? And that is in a field that I'm not really thrilled about, and it's not. And I say to everybody that you have no excuse. Everybody can do something. You can be great at anything you want to if you just do it. If you just set out and you have the courage and you wake up in the morning. Right? But I also have this transformational thing, that I have set goals with my wife for our life, what we want to achieve. So when I'm having a shitty day, and it rains, and the mosquitoes are eating you, and the ticks are on you, and everything sucks that day, and it hurts everywhere because you're doing something in pain. Then I'm like, yeah, but right now I'm working for that change at home, or I'm working for that house I'm going to buy in Lecco di Garda in Italy with my wife and retire to in 3 years, right? That kind of thing. So as long as you have that thing in mind, then you can endure the other thing. And that's one thing we learn as soldiers of security. We learn to endure things, to suffer, right? And look at the goal, right? And then the vision ahead and where you're going, rather than where you are right now. So you're not stuck on jungle patrol looking at the bush in front of you. And it's like, I don't know if you heard that story, but there's this military patrol thing, and because I've been in patrol units, where you are like, when you are walking in a patrol in the jungle, like in Vietnam, the front guys were chopping jungle, and looking for VCs all the time, for Charlie, right? And they were constantly threatening, and there was nothing but bloody jungle all this shitty day, and they just continued, and they hated this effing jungle, right? And the guys looking at the side, they were looking for enemies all the time, and they were also stressed, and they didn't like it. The guys that was in rear, catching rear, they were looking behind all the time, but they were also constantly seeing this open field, this open trail, right? They were looking backwards as where they've been, and they've seen how far they come. And then when you stop, these guys are always like cheerful, right? They had to run a little faster because they're behind, so you end up in the military, you end up walking fast. But they were seeing the good sides. The ones on the front, they were just seeing the problem, but the guys behind saw how far we came, right? So, and then that's how you learn in the military. You need to rotate people all the time between these points, because otherwise they get worn out. And that's something I have learned. There's always like, you need to stop and look back and say, oh, where was I last year? Where was I 3 months ago? What have I done since? And then you're like, oh, I'm pat yourself on the back. Hey, good job, Dan. You're actually improving. You're actually transforming. You're doing things, because otherwise it can be very hard to see. So unless you have that clear vision where you're going, and you can see that I was here last year and now I'm here, right? That's a progress, right? I can measure it. Great. Then you move forward. Right? That's a fantastic part.
It's interesting you say that. I do a bit of a technique with people where I get them to think about everything they've achieved. When someone's feeling down in the dumps, they don't feel they've done anything, or they feel they've never achieved or anything like that. And I'll say to them, right, think of everything you've achieved, anything, how small it is. It could be just having a driving license. It could be passing an exam. You could go as big as, traveling the world or getting a master's degree. Whatever it is, write it down. And then when you've written it all down, when you finally got everything and exhausted that list, go onto Google Images, type in certificate template, and then find the template that you fancy, a nice certificate you find, and then put in a certificate for everything you've achieved. And then tell me you've not achieved anything. And I did it with somebody. 2 weeks later, she said she was still doing a list. She'd been that long, she hadn't realized how much she'd actually achieved. So just a simple visualization like that goes to show what people have actually achieved. And it's surprising how much you've done in your life, even as simple as having children or getting married. Getting divorced might be a good achievement. But, well, at least my way. But, everything you've done, you've achieved something. So when you've got a certificate for it, that visualization makes somebody realize how much they've actually done overall.
Exactly.
So
that is the thing. Looking at your past, look at what you have achieved. Look what you can be grateful for. Gratitude as well. Pat yourself on the back. What do I have actually, right? Versus, and particularly when you travel the third world and you realize, like, you come home, you don't complain. But that's like downhills, like when you're in the military or something and you're on patrol or you're out there in the field and just the joy of coming home and realizing you have running water in your faucet, that there's a refrigerator There's actually lots of food. You have a warm shower. You have a toilet to sit down on. You have toilet paper. There's like the comfort zone. Like you're just like the first day you're home, and you're like, oh, I love life. You know, it's fantastic, right? And then, of course, 5 days later, you open the fridge and there's no food, right? So and it's bolting, right? Because we get so quickly acclimatized to the comfort of life and everything there is, and then we always see something else that has more, and we forget to be grateful for what we actually have and how much we have achieved, and look at it from that perspective. And where was I yesterday? Not where's the other person, but where am I and where was I? And I have actually achieved more than them, right? And I have a very, very good friend I'm working with, which is he was 170 kilos when we started working together, and he lost 19 in the first 2 months. But when he goes into the gym, he's like, oh, look at this guy, you know. It's like, yeah, but this guy had been here for 6 months and he has managed to lose 2 kilos. You know, you've been here for 2 weeks and you lost that. Your progress is so much greater than his, and it's so much harder because just your body weight, every time you're doing a push-up, you're pushing 2 times me, you know, right? You're carrying far more than me. You're doing far much more. You should be proud of yourself. You know, you're able to carry much more. Right? And this guy, you train, actually, he realized, hey, I can actually lift more because he had really solid leg muscles. Yes, because you're carrying 170 kilos around everything, right? But very thing that actually, hey, I'm actually good at something. I'm strong here, right? And that changed things. And this is the thing of looking where you are, but where you have, how far you have come. Don't look at somebody else. Because I'm fairly good at running, right? But if you put me next to Usain Bolt, I'm going to look like a turtle. You know, I'm going to look like a total. I cannot compare myself to Usain Bolt, right? It just doesn't make any sense. But in life, often we have this problem. We are comparing ourselves to coaches starting, and I'm talking to them, and I'm like, oh, but I'm still not. I mean, look at Tony Robbins. Yeah, okay, but he's like 40 years ahead of you. Stop looking at him. Look at where you were last year. Don't look at what Tony Robbins is today. He didn't start here. You know, he started way back then. You know, right? And then move on. And so look at where you are. The same for us. Like everybody, look at where you are, where you've been, and just how much have you changed in the week, and the last day, last month, last year, 10 years, etc. Right? And we have all changed. Once we do that, we realize, whoa, I am in momentum, right? I am a force of reckoning, you know? And I have something to contribute to. Everybody has. I haven't met somebody you couldn't learn anything from. And I believe, it's also another thing in my life, I believe everybody has a superpower or two that they just many often haven't realized yet, but it's there. And there's something they're uniquely good at. And they can outcompete 99% of the world in that field, right? Whatever that is. And that's very often also something you actually find is your real calling somewhere, you know? That you figure that out and move with that one. You know?
Brilliant. Absolutely. I totally agree, mate. Totally agree. It's about changing that mindset, the transformation of the mind. You know, doing what you can do, not what you can't do. We do focus on what we can't do more than we do what we can. You know, and we do, you know, in NLP, we get told, you know, that we get taught that we all have the resources in ourselves to change, you know, to be able to make that change going forward. Absolutely. Anything from you, Alexandra?
Not
she looks absolutely transfixed. I think she's been transfixed by you, Dan.
Yeah, it was a lovely chat. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Great.
Dan, you've got 5 minutes of fame, mate. I'm going to do 5 minutes of fame here. So the floor's yours. Sell yourself, what you do, your contact details. Hopefully we'll have plenty of people calling in. Oh, you'll have plenty of people calling in to get on to have some coaching from you. All yours, mate.
Well, best way is to catch me online, of course. dansommercoaching.eu, my website. TikTok. I'm an old man, but I actually like TikTok. I enjoy TikTok, and I enjoy marketing on TikTok because TikTok is so brutal. It gives you your answer right in your face. You put on some video and you will know instantly whether people like you or don't like you. They don't like your shirt or they don't like something else. You will get it raw right there, you know. And you can. It's really good for testing what you're going to do, how people react to it. So I'm on TikTok on Dan Sommer Coaching. Of course, I'm on Facebook too under Dan Sommer Coaching and Instagram. So, but I like social media, I'm building up my YouTube site, but basically just send me an email, dan@dansommercoaching.eu. I'm having what we call courageous leadership and success seminar workshop coming up on the 27th of November. That's free, 1.5 hour, where I will go through a lot of the things I learned in my life and what you can do and give you some tools you can work with. I always have a free 30-minute session for anyone. They're welcome to sign up and they can do what they learn from that. And I will not sell during those 30 minutes. And then they can hang up, or they can continue if they want to me to offer the service, so I can help them with something. Usually people ask them, where do we go from here, right? And that thing. So I'm not a good salesman in that matter. I hate being sold things, and I don't think you should be sold. If you're not ready for the transformation, then I don't want to work with you anyway, right? So it's not, for me, it's not about selling a client. It's about a client coming to me and say, hey, I like you, I know your energy and your inspiration, and I think we can work together. And I think it's very important in coaching that you have that, you work together. It should be both people should agree to work together. It's not about the money. It's about, can we work towards this goal together, and are we a good fit, right? Both from the coach sides and also for the clients. So for me, people can't just go and buy and pay for my service online. They need to be accepted first, because I need to feel also that it's worth working with them, and they want to transform. But if they want to do that, and I don't care who you are, I don't care if you're in prison, I don't care if you're the worst person in the world or the best person in the world. I care that you want to transform your mind, body, and spirit, and that I would like to help with, because I think that's my role in life.
Brilliant, absolutely, mate. Yeah, it's that want to change. You've got to want to change in order to, and that is, like you made a very good point there, Dan, is that it's got to be the right fit for both people, for the coach as well as the coachee. If it's, because it's not going to work otherwise, it's going to be a complete waste of time, your time just as much as theirs. And they're not going to be happy and spent some money. They're not going to be too happy about if they're not going to get anything from it. We all know that they will get something from you, the order, but they have to want to change in the first place.
Yeah, but if they don't want to, then there's not much I can do for them anyway, except give them some tools, but they're not going to use fully anyway. So if you don't want to, it's not going to change, right? It's kind of like the guy, the friend you have that's alcoholic. You can tell them all the time to stop drinking, but they're not going to stop drinking until they come to the point in their life where they want to stop drinking, right? Then they will find the cure, right? And then that's the same way with coaching. Once you're ready to, I can't do this anymore, I can't live with myself, then you're ready for change, right? Or I can't live this life, I can't do this, I felt something yesterday, I had an experience, it transformed me, I want to change, right? Then you're ready, and then comes to everyone in life at some point. And sometimes you meet the right person. It's just that there's that moment. I don't think there's any coincidences in life, in human relations. When we meet for a reason. We need to impart something, and there is no teacher and there's no student. It's a collaboration. We both learn from the same thing. We both change. The coach change with the client, and the client change with the coach. It goes both ways. So,
brilliant. Thank you, mate. Thanks, mate, for being on here today.
Yeah.
It's always been a pleasure talking to you anyway, and today, to find more about you is even better. I think it's been fantastic.
Oh, but it's interesting, isn't it, that we met on a 99. Well, who would have thought on a rainy day in Bill's Wells in Wales, and we were sitting here 24 years later talking about transforming the world rather than protecting from right? So it's a huge thing, but we're both here, right? And that's the thing, again, I say there is no coincidences. Maybe we met in order to sit here today, right?
Absolutely. It's incredible, the change in what we do, is so diverse, from either, like you say, being either in a hostile environment to now sitting with somebody and changing their life for the better. It's amazing what we do.
It is. But the only thing I regret from this whole interview is that you've been interviewing me, and I missed catching up with you, what you've been doing. So I'm going to have to take a revenge and bring you on.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be busy the next 6 months. No, honestly, it'd be great to catch up with you at some point. We'll have to do it again. We'll arrange something and we'll have a good chat. Either that or I'm going to come over to Denmark.
Yeah, exactly. Do that.
Could even be doing that.
Together, you and I, to do that ayahuasca thing with her. Sorry.
There's some things I'll do, but I'm not even going to go on that one. I've heard too many stories. I've heard too many stories of too many people. And can I just mention that she's not just done it once.
Oh.
Right? She's done it more than once.
Yeah. She has something with puking into a bucket that really, really, really.
I only had to puke once.
Oh, okay. You were like, my friends told me that. I was puking, and then I had to fantastic, and then I was puking, and then I had this fantastic, then I was puking, and I was like, wow, and you paid for this. It must be really interesting. You know, you want to each other, but having an experience. So, yeah.
Yeah. After the fourth time, she was giving them the bucket. You know.
Good share.
So yeah, well, it's like I say, mate, thanks very much for coming on the show, and hopefully everybody will get to know more about you and your coaching. We're just going to sign off with, obviously we're going to have more coming up, and it's interesting you mentioned about setting goals and entrepreneurship, etc. We will have a show with somebody, so look out for it, Dan. There's a mate of mine, Sean West, will be coming on and talking about coaching in setting up security business, believe it or not.
Right.
So Sean will be coming up very soon on one of the shows, so that'll be something you might be interested in. And talking of which, Alexandra will be saying, share and comment. What will you be saying, Alexandra?
Sorry, you lost me.
I was waiting for the cue there, but it obviously didn't work. Comment and share and press the like button. Yes, yeah. I'll do it. I'll do it all. If you want to know about nature coaching and forest bathing,
then contact me, alexa@alexandrakatzer.com.
We're professional at this, Dan. Honestly, we are professional at this. If you want to get in touch, Dan, he's given us his details. It's Dan Sommer.
DanSommerCoaching.eu.
Dan Sommer Coaching at EU.
Yeah.
All one word, all one line. If you want to contact me, themindcore@gmail.com. And like I say, I would like to mention, obviously, some of our supporters for the Mind Core, which is Promo Doodle, who do a lot of cartoon kind of promotional video kind of work. PBA, the Professional Bodyguard Association, if you want to do any training regarding security, it's a welcome company, really good company to work to go to training. Also supported by the Burnley and District Motorcycle Club, great bunch of people who have their club nights every Friday night in Burnley. Mira Gavazio, and I do hope I mentioned that name correctly, who's done some promotional videos for us as well. So thanks very much. So yeah, hit the likes, the comments, and share it. And that's us for another show. So thanks again for everybody coming on.